So fundamentally, Beowulf is an elegiac work, infused with both heroism but also melancholy. It anticipates doom and constantly foreshadows destruction. At the same time, however, it also affirms values of courage and memory and honour. So again, there's that blending. Beowulf assumes that the world can be morally structured by deeds. There's agency there. Now, in Grendel by John Gardner, we're asking essentially what happens, how does it feel when even that structure is doubted? So, moving on to Grendel now, a work written in 1971. Some of you will be aware that one of my favourite or most treasured characters in all of fiction, in the whole world of literature, is Frankenstein's creature, who you might be able to see on my wall there, an engraving from the original edition of Frankenstein as part of the frontispiece. And I had in mind, for various reasons, to read another book about a solitary character. And so I thought I should read Grendel. And in fact, somewhere that I've still not been able to pinpoint, I read an excerpt from Grendel. It's a long time ago, and I thought to myself, I must read Grendel at some point. I still don't know what that book was. It might be in a compendium of fantasy literature, or it might in fact be a book on teratology that I have. I think it's called On Monsters, I think. It might be. It most likely is. But I got Grendel as a standalone book, and as I said in the introduction to this video, I wanted to read it as a standalone, but I felt that I was going to miss something, so I ended up reading Beowulf first. I'm glad I did, because there's a lot here. I think it really does require reading Beowulf first. This is it's a postmodern work. Not postmodern in its overall philosophy, more postmodern in the way the text is constructed. It's very experimental. It's ironic. It's very playful, fragmentary. The book is almost a testing ground for different worldviews, different philosophies, and it's not really necessarily saying that all are equal. It's in fact, it comes down pretty severely on the idea that it exhausts. Gardner lets nihilism exhaust itself, essentially. Because what I read, and I realise we're jumping into the deep end, but I might as well start somewhere. What I read from this very early on made me groan. It made me groan. I was looking for a solitary character, and I got that in some form in Grendel, the character of Grendel. And yet, there's this worldview that Grendel holds that I just found utterly boring. We all know it. It's a worldview that says everything is mechanical, everything is meaningless, there's no inherent there's no joy to be found in anything, because everything is just mindless and mechanical. It's fundamentally solipsistic. Grendel explicitly says that he is like an island, essentially. Only he exists, and meaning is just a projection. He deliberately cuts himself off, admittedly after some harrowing events, which is his saving grace, essentially, because otherwise he would be deeply unlikable. But he essentially he despises the world to the point of genuine misanthropy. One doesn't have much time for this. It's fundamentally against what I believe, as someone who tries to take on an animistic worldview, who believes in a relational ontology, that everything is connected, not in a fluffy new age way. I mean, there is always another. There's always a push and pull. There is enrichment, but there's also negotiation. It's the animist perspective, a post-secular animist perspective of Patrick Curry, Graham Harvey, David Abram, that kind of thing. So reading this very tedious account of someone, woe is me, only I exist, only I have a conscience. The animals in this book are described as meaningless machines. I mean, most people today have that opinion, even still. But I am getting ahead of myself. Going back to the very basics, Grendel is not it's not merely a retelling of the epic Beowulf. It's not a retelling of this narrative, not by any stretch of the imagination. It is actually much more detached from Beowulf than I had imagined. It is fundamentally a philosophical reimagining, almost entirely from the mind, from the perspective of the, I almost said the creature in Frankenstein, from the monster's consciousness. It's his point of view, because again, as I said at the start of the Beowulf review, we don't get much of Grendel and Beowulf at all. I was actually quite disappointed. I had that modern perspective of let's have gradual development, different meetings between Beowulf and Grendel, a slow and developed narrative. But of course, in Beowulf, he's almost immediately killed faces the moment Grendel faces Beowulf. This, like Frankenstein, gives a voice to the creature, the scorned outsider. In Beowulf, he is this unthinking terror. In this, he's a highly articulate entity, a highly articulate being. Just like in Frankenstein, he is someone that is actually more aware. He's deeply aware in ways that other men aren't, other people aren't, which again causes that sense of isolation. It is true, perhaps, that I feel some trifling dislike of deer, but no more dislike than I feel for other natural things, discounting men. But deer, like rabbits and bears, and even men, can make, concerning my race, no delicate distinctions. That is their happiness. They see all life without observing it. They're buried in it like crabs in mud, except men, of course. I am not in a mood, just yet, to talk of men. So it goes with me day by day and age by age, I tell myself, locked in the deadly progression of moon and stars. I shake my head, muttering darkly on shaded paths, holding conversation with the only friend and comfort this world affords, my shadow. Wild pigs clatter away through brush. A baby bird falls feet up in my path, squeaking. With a crabby laugh I let him lie, kind heaven's merciful bounty to some sick fox. So it goes with me, age by age, talking, spinning a web of words, pale walls of dreams between myself and all I see. At last, heavy as an ice-capped mountain, I rise and work my way to the inner wall, beginning of wolf slopes, the edge of my realm. I stand in the high wind, balanced, blackening the night with my stench, gazing down to cliffs that fall away, to cliffs, and once again I am aware of my potential. I could die. I cackle with rage and suck in breath. Dark chasms, I scream from the cliff edge. Seize me to your foul black bowels and crush my bones. I sigh, depressed, and grind my teeth. I toy with shouting some tidbit more, some terrifying unthinkable threat, some blackly fuliginous riddling hex, but my heart's not in it. Owls cross my path, as silently as raiding ships, and at the sound of my foot, lean wolves rise, glance at me awkwardly, and, neat of step as lizards, sneak away. I used to take some pride in that, the caution of owls when my shape looms in, the alarm I stir in these giant northern wolves. I was younger then, still playing cat and mouse with the universe. I moved down through the darkness, burning with murderous lust, my brains raging at the sickness I could observe in myself as objectively as might a mind 10 centuries away. As you can see, this is a very solipsistic and deeply disturbed mind that we're dealing with here. It's a very harsh read very early on. It doesn't hold back. I'm reading on page 10 here, and already it's like we're in the throes of deep romantic, dark distress, and it's all done very knowingly. The Grendel here, he's aware of his own preening. He's aware of his own thought processes. It's very meta. He laughs at himself for acting out in the way that he does. It's very, it's it's not. He's not in himself. He says he's actually objective. He can see objectively his mind as if this mind is 10 centuries away. Stars spattered out through lifeless night from end to end, like jewels scattered in a dead king's grave, tease torment my wits toward meaningful patterns that do not exist. There's no meaningful patterns in the universe. Nothing is real apart from him. Everything is mechanical. Everything is cold. The cold mechanics of the stars, etc., etc. The world reduced to nothing, essentially. Grendel takes on he lives in a disenchanted world very thoroughly. He's not evil, however. There are events early on in this book where he has a sense of adventure and almost hope in the world inheres in him when he's a young being. But over time, there are certain events which I won't get into that shape his character, and it makes his being an outsider more severe. He becomes more detached. One of these things is his fundamental disconnection from his mother. Again, in Beowulf, Grendel's mother is this swamp hag who in Beowulf seems to move with almost more purpose, and she is vengeful, and she has a kind of dominance about her, I suppose. And again, in the animated film, I remember she has Grendel's mother is, again, she's somewhat more seductive. In Grendel, she's almost this babbling brute mind, this hag who can barely speak. In fact, she's lost her language. She says duel to speak, essentially just mumbling words. She's been reduced over time. It's indicative of how dark this book is. Gardner has chosen to transform Grendel's mother in this way, from someone with more direction and seduction to this. So again, Grendel, not evil, more like reactive detachment. Just like Frankenstein's creature, he can be touched by the beautiful. He can be stirred. And one of the very first instances of this is with the Shaper. The Shaper is a fundamental figure in this book, who symbolizes the power of art to bind, to make connections. The Shaper, this bard, he weaves tales of old. But he also looks into the future. It's fundamentally myth making. It's the mythopoeic impulse that the Shaper has. My belly rumbles, sick on their sour meat. He's just killed some of Hrothgar's men. I crawl through blood-stained leaves to the eaves of the forest, and there peek out. The dogs fall silent at the edge of my spell, and where the king's hall surmounts the town, the blind old Shaper, harp clutched tight to his fragile chest, stares futilely down, straight at me. From that point, we're actually seeing that the Shaper is this figure who, we know very early on, he's going to have some bigger part to play. He's this blind force that nonetheless can see how much of an impact he will have on Grendel's life. The Shaper is really the first instance of another type of seeing or being that challenges Grendel's kind of reactive detachment and nihilism. The Shaper, when he's singing in Hrothgar's hall, Heorot, it deeply touches Grendel. It actually reminded me of Frankenstein's creature listening to the de Lacy family. So he sang, or intoned, with the harp behind him, twisting together like sailors' ropes the bits and pieces of the best old songs. The people were hushed. Even the surrounding hills were hushed, as if brought low by language. He knew his art. He was the king of the shapers, harp-string scratchers, oak moss bearded, inspired by winds. That was what had brought him over wilderness, down blind man's alleys of time and space, to Hrothgar's famous hall. He would sing the glory of Hrothgar's line and gild his wisdom, and stir up his men to more daring deeds for a price. Grendel goes away touched. He says, I too crept away, my mind aswim in ringing phrases, magnificent, golden, and all of them incredibly lies. He's touched, but he doesn't allow himself to be fully moved. He's saying, I'm going to set that aside. This art, it's just a lie. It's lies breathed through silver. Some of you will understand that reference. It's essentially what Grendel is thinking here. And interestingly, after Grendel first hears the Shaper, he's out on the moors. And where once he saw the land as grey and flat and disenchanted, it now says, after hearing the old blind Shaper's songs, the stars overhead were alive with the promise of Hrothgar's vast power, his universal peace. The moors their axes had stripped of trees glowed silver in the moonlight, and the yellow lights of peasant huts were scattered like jewels on the raven dark cloak of a king. I was so filled with sorrow and tenderness I could hardly have found it in my heart to snatch a pig. Thus I fled, ridiculous hairy creature torn apart by poetry, crawling, whimpering, streaming tears across the world like a two-headed beast, like mixed up lamb and kid at the tail of a baffled indifferent ewe. And I gnashed my teeth and clutched the sides of my head as if to heal the split. But I couldn't. The language is just fantastic. So again, just to bring this back to foundations, you can perhaps already see here that in Beowulf, Grendel is almost a non-entity, but in this he is fully fleshed out. So he's deeply touched by his first encounter with the Shaper who sings in in Hrothgar's hall, Heorot. And he's lying in his underground home next to his mother, this bloated swamp hag type creature. And he's musing on what he's heard, and he's thinking about how he's thinking back on what the Shaper said regarding his lineage, Grendel's lineage, being one of the race of outcasts descended from Cain. It was a cold-blooded lie that a god had lovingly made the world and set out the sun and moon as lights to land dwellers, that brothers had fought, that one of the races was saved, the other cursed, yet he, the old Shaper, might make it true by the sweetness of his harp, his cunning trickery. It came to me with a fierce jolt that I wanted it, as they did too, though vicious animals, cunning, cracked with theories. I wanted it, yes, even if I must be the outcast, cursed by the rules of his hideous fable. The Shaper is almost making the world. He's learning, just like with the de Lacy family actually, Grendel is learning of the world, of myth and history from an outside perspective. And so just returning back to this narrative here, Grendel is lying nearby his mother in the caves. Pitiful, foul, her smile a jagged white tear in the firelight. Waste. She whimpered one sound, dool, 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 scratching at her bosom, a ghastly attempt to climb back up to speech. It's incredible, his command of language is incredible. Gardner's, that is. I clamped my eyes shut, listened to the river, underground, and after a time I slept. I sat up with a jerk. The thing was all around me now, like a thunder charge. "Who is it?" I said. No answer, darkness. My mother was asleep. She was as dead-looking as a red-grey old sea elephant stretched out on the shore of a summer day. I got up silently and left the cave. I went to the cliff wall, then down to the moor. Still nothing. He's trying to search for... He's been hearing this voice that he can't quite locate. I made my mind blank and fell, sank away like a stone through earth and sea toward the dragon. Now, whereas in Beowulf the dragon comes in at the very end, it's almost indicative of how Gardner is playing with the meaning of these characters, and the book itself is a testing ground for different philosophies, because whereas the dragon is just this enemy that has to be destroyed by Beowulf, and Beowulf has to face his own demise, in this, the dragon is himself an embodiment of a worldview, and we get a long extended scene, not too far into the book, where Grendel is driven to meet the dragon. No use of a growl, a whoop, a roar in the presence of that beast. Vast red golden, huge tail coiled, limbs sprawled over his treasure hoard, eyes not fiery, but cold as the memory of family deaths. Vanishing away across invisible floors, they were things of gold, gems, jewels, silver vessels, the colour of blood, and the undulant dragon-red light. So this section with the dragon then, it's very curious. Long stretches where the dragon talks about metaphysics, and it's not actually meant to be taken seriously. It's deliberately obtuse. It's pure. It almost sounds like obscurantist language at a lot of points. Suffice it to say, the dragon constantly finds himself laughing because nothing matters to him. If the creature has a sense of nihilism, it's more like a reactive nihilism, and he can't be touched. The dragon, he takes a view from nowhere, and as Thomas Nagel would say, it's hard to take anything seriously when he can see everything, all events playing out. He is a character of stasis. He embodies a sense of cosmic irony. He goes on these long tangents about metaphysics, and he even quotes syllogisms and plays with them. He thinks of everything as a game, essentially. He talks like this, and he's speaking of men here. They only think they think. No total vision, total system, merely schemes with a vague family resemblance, no more identity than bridges and, say, spiderwebs. But they rush across chasms on spiderwebs, and sometimes they make it, and that, they think, settles that. I could tell you 1,000 tiresome stories of their absurdity. They'd map out roads through hell with their crackpot theories. They are here to the moon and back lists of paltry facts, simple facts in isolation, and facts to connect them, ands and buts, are the sine qua non of all their glorious achievement. But there are no such facts. Connectedness is the essence of everything. It doesn't stop them, of course. They build the whole world out of teeth, deprived of bodies to chew or be chewed on. It's not perhaps the book that you think it is. The cover especially does not portray the actual text well, I think, and especially the Fantasy Masterworks cover. You can't judge a book by its cover, of course, but this is a very intelligent and considered work, for lack of a better term. Remember, this is a dragon speaking, the dragon from Beowulf, who is just a faceless enemy. And in particular, the differences of time span. We, by which I mean you, not us, are apt to take modes of observable functioning in our own bodies as setting an absolute scale. And as a matter of fact, it's extremely rash to extend conclusions derived from observation far beyond the scale of magnitude in the first place to which the observation was confined. In the second place, for example, the determination as to what types are exhibited in any indicated situation. For example, there's the singular proposition, this is green, and there's the more general proposition, all those things are green. This type of inquiry is what your usual reasoning takes care of. And on and on and on. It gets even more convoluted, and he talks about a jug having an absolute democracy of atoms. It has importance or there-ness, so to speak, but no expression, or loosely, aha-ness. Importance is primarily monistic in its reference to the universe. Limited to a finite individual occasion, importance ceases to be important. In some sense or other, we can skip the details, importance is derived from the immanence of infinitude in the finite. Now, this can all sound highly pretentious, but it's meant to be funny, and that is its achievement. At the end of this long diatribe or credo, he essentially says, things come and go. That's the gist of it. In a billion years, everything will have come and gone several times in various forms. Even I will be gone. A certain man will absurdly kill me. A terrible pity. Loss of a remarkable form of life. Conservationists will howl. He chuckled. Meaningless, however. So as you can see, it's playing with the idea of a view from nowhere. Everything is meaningless in the great span of time. The dragon explains everything and yet at the same time empties everything. All he does is withdraw. He is stasis. He just hoards. In the long conversation with Grendel and the dragon, Grendel starts to feel as though, although he takes on this nihilistic worldview, he can't be touched, especially by the Shaper, and his view into the hall he can almost feel a sense of connection with the regular humanity, and something in that it comes into the encounter with the dragon, in that he almost dares the dragon. He's saying, there's more than that. There can be more than that. He's asking questions of the dragon, saying, why can't it be different? Grendel is actually asking the dragon, what does it matter? I could just stop giving people heart attacks over nothing. As in, stop attacking the people. Why shouldn't one change one's ways, improve one's character? And the dragon shrugs, whatever you like, do as you think best. But why? Why? Ridiculous question. Why anything? And so it goes. And one of the things that comes out of this is that, essentially, I'm going into more detail here, but the dragon says something very interesting. He says, you are, so to speak, the brute existent, by which they learn to define themselves. The exile, captivity, death they shrink from, the blunt facts of their mortality, their abandonment, that's what you make them recognize, embrace. You are mankind, or man's condition, inseparable as the mountain climber and the mountain. If you withdraw, you'll instantly be replaced. Brute existence, are a dime a dozen. No sentimental trash then. If man's the irrelevance that interests you, stick with him, scare him to glory. It's all the same in the end, matter in motion, simple or complex. No difference, finally. Death, transfiguration, ashes to ashes, and slime to slime, amen. So just moving along a little bit in the narrative here, just wanted to pinpoint an interesting scene, or section rather, or a movement. There is the confrontation with Unferth, who, as you will know if you've read Beowulf, is a figure who deeply envies Beowulf. He is a figure who is ashamed of his own, his lack of courage. And that's developed in Grendel. Grendel goes to Heorot and gets into a confrontation with Unferth, and Grendel essentially denies Unferth the the glory that he wants by basically mocking him, throwing apples at him instead of actually engaging him in combat. And he's slighted by this. Unferth is slighted by this, and he actually goes out. At Grendel, he's very shocked by Unferth's tenacity. He does not expect Unferth to come chase him, essentially, to the mere, down and under the water, to his lair. And it's an interesting point, because Grendel denies him a heroic death. Unferth is lying out, completely drained from his journey down underwater, facing the fire snakes, and Grendel finds this almost hilarious. He's bored. He's bored by the hero's talk, Unferth's talk of heroism, of holding to the old ways, wanting to be remembered as someone who faced the demon Grendel. Grendel just doesn't have any of it. He doesn't allow Unferth to attain glory. It's just an interesting way that Gardner plays with all the characters in Beowulf. He singles out specific scenes and develops them further. Unferth wants to be defined by his actions, and yet he's actually trapped in Grendel's own narrative. It's a fascinating play. He's not being allowed to attain that epic significance. So, as you might imagine, there's a lot more to this book, but I've gone into more detail than I thought I would. The narrative is itself, it's actually one of my new favourite books. So I'm trying to encapsulate a little bit more. I will say that there are phases in Grendel's life where he's constantly confronted by different ways of seeing and being. Meets various people that test him, essentially. And one of these is another character in the book is Queen Beowulf, or Beowulf. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. There is the Shaper's lies, followed by the hero's delusion, or self-delusion, Unferth, as we've just spoken about. And now there is the Queen, the wife of, the bride of Hrothgar, who tests him. Her beauty tests him. I'm not going to get into all of the details here, but you can see that the book is putting someone who is reactively detaching themselves from the world and forcing encounters that shape him. He's thinking back on a particular scene in the hall, the royal hall. He says, "I ground my teeth on my own absurdity. Whatever their excuse might be, I had none, I knew. I had seen the dragon, ashes to ashes. And yet I was teased, tortured by the red of her hair and the set of her chin and the white of her shoulders. Teased toward disbelief in the dragon's truths. A glorious moment was coming, my chest insisted, and even the fact that I myself would have no part in it, a member of the race God-cursed, according to the Shaper's tale, was trifling. In my mind, I watched her freckled hand move on the old man's arm as at once I'd listened to the sigh of the Shaper's harp. Ah, woe, woe! How many times must a creature be dragged down the same ridiculous road? The Shaper's lies, the hero's self-delusion, now this, the idea of a queen. There are a lot of things that I could speak about in this book. There is, for example, the extended movement where we're dealing with Hrothulf, the nephew of Hrothgar, and his political strivings. And I'm just looking at other sections as well. There's a curious section that shows again that this book is fundamentally. It comes near the end, but and it's fairly short, but it shows that the book is fundamentally about testing philosophies, questioning religion. It's not afraid to show that it's thinking through things. And there is a section that deals with a character called Orc, who is one of the priests, a black-robed priest with a beard down to his knees, this wise seer figure. So it's a pagan world. It's fundamentally a pagan world, but the Shaper uses certain language that feels more like it comes from the Christian worldview. And there's also this more abstract theology that takes place that's kind of threaded throughout the book as well, and that's primarily through the priests. So the Orc talks about the king of the gods, who is the ultimate limitation. His existence is the ultimate irrationality. It's another example of humans thinking through things. This is much more abstracted than the uh, the myth making, it's almost socio-political myth making of the Shaper. So there's another element, and that is of course Beowulf. Where is Beowulf in this text? He comes in at the very end. He is the eponymous Beowulf, this heroic figure who shapes the narrative in the original source text. In this, he is in the background, as one might expect. So I just want to, as a way of transitioning to that final phase, and another type of being, I just want to read you this passage because it's sort of a calm before the storm, and I just found that there's such a sense of melancholy here, such a sense of darkness. It's incredible. And this is Grendel speaking. I do not usually raid in the winter, when the world is a corpse. I would be wiser to be curled up. I sleep like a bear in my cave. My heart moves slowly, like freezing water, and I cannot clearly recall the smell of blood. And yet I am restless. I would fall if I could through time and space to the dragon. I cannot. I walk slowly, wiping the snow from my face with the back of my arm. There is no sound on earth but the whispering snowfall. I recall something, a void boundless as a nether sky. I hang by the twisted roots of an oak, looking down into immensity. Vastly far away I see the sun, black but shining, and slowly revolving around it there are spiders. I pause in my tracks, puzzled, though not stirred by what I see. But then I am in the woods again, and the snow is falling, and everything alive is fast asleep. It is just some dream. I move on, uneasy, waiting. Waiting for what? The coming of Beowulf, essentially. And I won't get into there's this idea of the twisted roots and the void and so forth, but I won't get into that. I'll leave it for you to figure out what that is referring to in more depth. And so Grendel is waiting. There's something building up, and actually there's a deep. I've never read anything quite like this before, even though I've read very dark and melancholy works before. There is this sense of deep, genuine melancholy, and almost it's just the complete loneliness of the winter. The shaper dies. He's lying on his deathbed with death white hands folded on top of the covers. His eyes, once webbed with visions, are shut. Everything is very solemn, and it's just this extended scene of winter, and Grendel is locked in this sense of tedium. He says, "In my cave, the tedium is worse. Of course, my mother no longer shows any signs of sanity, hurrying back and forth wall to wall, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4, dark forehead furrowed like a new ploughed field, her eyes glittering and crazy as a captured eagle's. Because now the Shaper is dead, strange thoughts come over me. I think of the pastness of the past, how the moment I am alive in, prisoned in, moves like a slowly tumbling form through darkness, the underground river. Not only ancient history, the mythical age of the brothers' feud, but my own history 1 second ago has vanished utterly, dropped out of existence. King Shield's great deeds do not exist back there in time. Back there in time is an illusion of language. They do not exist at all. My wickedness 5 years ago, or 6 or 12, has no existence except as now, mumbling, sacrificing the slain world to the omnipotence of words. I strain my memory to regain it. I snatch by my wits a time when I was very small, and my mamma held me softly in her arms. Ah, how I loved you, mamma, dead these many years. I snatch a time when I crouched outside the mead hall, hearing the first strange hymns of the Shaper. Beauty, holiness, how my heart rocked. he is dead. I should have captured him, teased him, tormented him, made a fool of him. I should have cracked his skull mid-song and sent his blood spraying out wet through the mead hall like a shocking change of key. One evil deed missed at a loss for all eternity. And he attends the funeral of the Shaper, and it's just so. There's a funereal tone to this entire end of the book, which is suddenly changed when Beowulf comes into the picture in the very last chapter or two. Everything changes when Beowulf comes into the picture. There's the calm before the storm, and then there is this surging. Grendel even says, I am mad with joy, at least I think it's joy. Strangers have come, and it's a whole new game. I kiss the ice on the frozen creeks, I press my ear to it, honouring the water that rattles below, for by water they came. And so, for those that are aware of Beowulf, the eponymous hero comes to the shores of the Danes, the Danish kingdom, offers his services to Hrothgar. So although Grendel is in fear of Beowulf, watching him from afar, it's an interesting tethering between the two. Grendel is watching Beowulf in Heorot, and he actually says that he remarks that he is essentially an outsider, not only among the Danes but everywhere. He is this mythic, legendary hero who is a man apart, and in that sense he's quite like Grendel. And so the final action plays out. Grendel goes down to face Beowulf. The Geats build up the fire, prepare to sleep, and now silence, darkness, it is time. Breaks through to Heorot, bursts the fire-forged bands of the door, the great door, and faces Beowulf. Beowulf is he's a symbol of, again, he's the embodiment of heroism. But more in a deeper sense, he is embodied resistance. He's a man of the hand, of the act. He's driving forward, he surges forward. He's not a thinker. So, in the very famous act, of course, of Beowulf gripping Grendel with his extremely strong grip, Grendel has met his match. And interestingly, Beowulf is whispering to Grendel. He says, as you see it, it is, while the seeing lasts. Dark nightmare history, time is coffin. But where the water was rigid, there will be fish, and men will survive on their flesh till spring. It's coming, my brother, believe it or not. Though you murder the world, turn plains to stone, transmogrify life into I and it. Strong searching roots will crack your cave, and rain will cleanse it. The world will burn green, sperm build again. My promise. Time is the mind, the hand that makes. Fingers on harp strings, hero swords, the acts, the eyes of queens. By that I kill you. It's just absolutely phenomenal language. That's something you would not have Beowulf say in the original text, but he's rejecting the detachment of the dragon and the nihilism of Grendel. It represents meaning enacted with limits. It's not naive optimism nor abstract theology. It's like Beowulf is commitment in time. So, 2 long reviews there. I had intended to make these much shorter, but as always I like to read excerpts and expound on various things. I think we can say that really Grendel is a battle between detachment and commitment. It's essentially saying that the dragon rises above the world, Grendel retreats from it, though not always for his own, it's not entirely his fault, and Beowulf pushes against it. And I was going to read the last scenes, but they're really quite sad. I'll leave that for you to read. Although if you've watched this, you've probably read both works, given that I have already provided many spoilers. So, with all of that said, that was Beowulf followed by Grendel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Till next time.